carrying on from the last video, Devraj Dal reciting a newspaper, appearing to recite, but he was, I could tell he was reconfirming it with me what I would think about it. And most likely it was what it was, just like he was reading from the newspaper. And he was, at first, actually, when you started reading, it was very serious. This, what they have written about, what do you think about it? That Royal Massacre, Nepal Royal Massacre 2001 was international intel operation, and that it was outsourced to Israeli Mossad agency and intelligence agency, Israeli intelligence agency Mossad, and they had sent several batches of Crown Prince Dipendra mask wearing assassins dressed in Nepali army uniform fatigue. Army fatigue anyway. So that's very plausible. So he asked me, "What do you think about it?" I said, "How do I know?" But he insisted. That guy wanted revenge. Basically, that I had declined his daughter. He had categorically said, my daughter would be coming for a project and you would have to handle it. It couldn't be more clearer than that. I wish, a tragedy of my life. I couldn't tell people everything. I knew I was an unwanted child. I was living with criminals, but deep inside, I knew I had to flee them at some point. Even when I had gone back to them. So he asked me, what I thought about it. I said, well, it's possible. It sounds plausible. Compared to I had before going to UK when he framed me, and then hence this 2 decades of criminal murderous imperial saga. He had asked me, I'd said the same thing. It doesn't. It sounds. It appears Dipendra was put blame on, and Ganendra obviously had everything to do with it. I had not said what had happened, but now he was himself telling me that it was Israeli intelligence agency Mossad which had sent several batches of assassins in Dipendra's mask. Now, that is very interesting, given that uh, I've talked about our Nepal expert in Oxford University in my Twitter threads. This guy named David Gellner. In summer of 2005, when I went to his house, this thing came up too. As I've talked about in Twitter threads, all Nepalese and Nepali, as in Nepal they say Nepali, all Nepali people and all Nepal related people, who have had a connection to Nepal, academics, development workers, whatnot, they always talk about it. They used it. 2005 is very close to 2001. Just recent event. So, in his house actually, I had gone to his house invited by him, and that's the time when he had said Nepal has to remain independent. When I had posed, I had already known by 2002. Given how things were going, and I used to wonder. All countries' borders are drawn for a historical reason. Historical accidents. So I used to give example of Canada as well. Actually, the only reason Canada remains independent is because in 1812 they chased the Americans out. That's the only reason. Otherwise, Canada would be part of America. So I used to give that an example. Nepal remained independent because British decided to leave Nepal alone after they had taken everything from Nepal. West, east, south. So, you're better off being in a big continental country, and my life story itself proves it. The reason I've been treated, my gloves stolen, openly too, in in a freaking sandwich shop. So, buy a shop, buy official business. I can go back to. I will go back to all the things that has happened to me in this island, treated like absolute non-being. They would never ever do that to an Indian. Nepalis are so proud of being a Gurkha. They say, oh, Nepal, Gurkha. this is how Nepalis are really treated, like absolutely non-human. When chance and opportunity comes, and that's the real worth of Nepalis, being an independent country, independent people. So anyway, that's the time when I had told him David Geller, this Nepal expert, our Nepal expert in Oxford, who actually, I mean, I don't know what was the thing that he put beneath me in 2015 uh, May, when I had gone to see him. I mean, I've written about it in Twitter. I mean, I thought it was time to, I mean, if I had talked about perhaps rape, all the bloodbath rapes in Nepal, I mean, time to get me right there and then. I mean, they need not have that elaborate, whatever it was, a coffee mug type big device underneath my chin just to record me. So anyway, I mean, this Nepal expert guy, whom I had told Nepal ought to be part of India, and he had almost scolded me, saying, you know, Nepal needed to remain independent as gateway to Tibet, otherwise it would be identical to Bihar. It said, I mean, later on you would have a Bihari in Nepal project. Let's not go there right now. But anyway, this Royal Massacre, Nepal Royal Massacre 2001 came up on in discussion, in informal talks, and he said, he had said, I mean, that was the time I started realizing perhaps this guy was Int'L person. He said, so what do you think? I mean, I heard several batches of Dipendra look-alike in masks had gone to assassinate. That was the time he said, well, you would know. I mean, later on, what happened in 2015, as I've talked about in Twitter threads, you know, when he uh, had somebody come inside and give him that coffee mug type big device put underneath my chin, so he would know. So now going back to post 2006, me going back to Nepal and having that conversation with Devraj Dal, when he was asking me, so what do you think happened? I was like, really sadist smile. When I was saying, okay, I mean, possible, I mean, logical. And I had written myself. I mean, a supposedly drunk, already very heavily drunk person, already high on drugs, intoxicated, high on hashish. I mean, had to be carried to his bed by three grown-up men, put to sleep, would come down in full army fatigue with several assault weapons loaded. I mean, already assault weapons were loaded, several assault weapons, loaded assault weapons, and carry out massacre in phases. I mean, that's, I mean, going back and forth between his quarter and this billiard hall, and that has been demolished now. I mean, during the reign of this war of Nepal Gyanendra, obviously to erase the crime scene. So I told him that's possible. And when I was saying this, he was like, he had his head tilted and was like giving me a smile like this. And it's like, you fool or what? I didn't, I mean, I didn't think anything of that right now, right then. I mean, I had already known what he'd done to me before going to America, I mean, before going to UK. But I mean, again, I mean, back to Nepal, you have to be relevant, as I've talked about in this development warism. So I had to go to his place, and you know, I mean, I at first they were trying to actively murder me right away. I mean, as I've talked about in Pokhara and I mean, I guess other places too. But uh, I have a feeling they tried several times. But it was definitely in Pokhara twice with the driver trying to have driver, you know, create accident. But I don't know whether they tried to get me directly in Kathmandu. They would not have dared. But later on, of course, I mean, it was a full fledged. I mean, and then right after I joined the UNDP in Nepal, I mean, they started draining my account. I mean, just openly. So, and then double charged me everywhere. So, so when I was telling him Devraj Dal, I mean, it's possible. I mean, it was an, I mean, he himself was telling me international intelligence operation outsourced to Israelis, Mossad, and then they had sent several batches of assassins in Dipendra's, Crown Prince Dipendra's prosthetic mask to murder everybody. So, so that was that. But what happened is after 2009, after these criminals, my own non-family criminals, after the war, other war, Snigdha Dungil, I had already become Intel operative. I mean, I was into Intel operation. Brought her boyfriend to eat on my money, and I tried to have him take on me. I had to bear all that because I had already known what that person had done. So I had to put up with it. And my plan was to get married and then, obviously go somewhere. And then, I mean, just what I've done eventually go to Australia, come to UK, and then let it all out. So, I mean, fight step by step. But the way it happened is she disclosed herself. She's obviously told to disclose and break the marriage after the marriage. And then I had downloaded it all, and I mean, I don't know what was their plan, but I gave it to that person's other family members, the chat she had with her boyfriend. And she was, by the way, buying food and to take it to her boyfriend from my money. I knew I knew what was happening. I would let it all go. Anyway, and then trying to have me murdered right outside the house by that little bridge uh, that crosses to go to her house. Nepal Intel person coming twice actually when her parents had gone to buy clothes in India. So, so after this criminal, after this woman, the marriage with the woman broke within, I mean, 6 days. And she disclosed. I mean, how can I accept? But then later on, I was forced to appeal to her to mend. And that was the reason. I mean, I needed to get out, and I had been left with no options between two sets of criminals: the state and my own family, and this war itself. So, but that didn't work out. I'm glad that didn't work out. Uh, so after the marriage broke up, I mean, it was deliberate. I mean, fake marriage anyway. So my non-family criminals had locked me up. I mean, that was the first time they framed me. I mean, obviously they had to. They were afraid that I told that war everything. So uh, to hush it, I mean, as it's been trying to be done here in Glasgow as well. I mean, everywhere. In Sydney, I had to compromise. I'm not going to compromise anymore. Not a chance. And I've written it in Twitter thread. And to get out alive, I had to, I mean, concede myself. So they locked me up, framing me as obviously, I mean, mentally ill is the best weapon you can get. I mean, to hush everything. I mean, uh, discredit a person, very person of a person, very person of a person, very idea of person, then discredit everything. So that's what they've done. But right after that had happened, I used to stay home most of the time. But then even I mean, it's such a cruel criminal. I mean, this eldest daughter, even turned out to be most cruel criminal. I was drug addled, but she forced me to drive her around, and they were giving me very high, strong medications, and I used to doze off, and she would yell at me for dozing off. I mean, while driving, I wouldn't. I mean, I had to be careful, obviously. So she had gone to a dental hospital by an area called Sorokute, and she'd gone inside about her, I mean, teeth getting her teeth done. I was waiting outside by the waiting chair, but it was like in a landing of stairs, and a guy comes and stares at me viciously. Very, I mean, looked like a street thug, very dark, very ugly. So looks at me very viciously and comes to sit with me, and then starts pulling something from the bag he was holding in the right hand, and tries to come closer to me. And I kept looking at him in his ear, when in his eyes, straight, unflinching. So I guess he got the message that I was not going to be afraid or threatened. I kept looking at him straight, I mean, without flinching. So he backed down and he just left. So At first, I thought perhaps, this criminal Snigdha Dungel, murderous criminal, obviously now. I'll get to the detail how she had tried to have been murdered by Nepal Intel agents, right by her house, coming to telling me to ride my bike alone, and she would telling me she would wait by the other side of the bridge. That nearly got me twice. But anyway, so at first I thought, this criminal had, many boyfriends, and it's her own network of friends. So I thought, you could interpret anything to get out of the situation like that. I had active boyfriends who and married just for the family's sake, already talked to by the Nepal Intel, and provided full impunity. So I thought first, it looked like it's some small time hoodlum, but I later realized, obviously it had to be Intel job. Taking a person's life is really, obviously, it has to be measured. It has to be very thought through. A family wouldn't be able, because the reason I thought perhaps it had to do with that person and her father is because I came to know the father was like a hoodlum later on. Just good for nothing hoodlum. You'd go and fight with people. So I mean, the daughter had interpreted it. That I was the fall guy. Even when I had given the whole chat printed to her family. So anyway, so that happened. That was obviously. So later on, what happened is I had given ad for the family mansion. To sift because of traffic issue, the mansion is a bit outside of the Kathmandu Valley Center, in fringe of the mountains, western edge of the valley. So I had given, and I started writing articles. I guess that triggered them as well in newspapers. So, and I think I was already online to. I had applied to some UN positions and some networking. I never let go of any of these things. But now I understand why any of the proper jobs I had applied nowhere worked would be because nothing would be allowed to be worked. So I'd given ad for the property rent, and I got a call from somebody saying it's for a telecommunication company from Israel, uh, looking for property in the area. So want to come and check it out. I said, okay. What time you want to come out? I said, I'm close by. I'll come right away. And the minute I had hung up the phone, I went. There was a ring, uh, door ring, uh, doorbell ringing, and then I went down to open. There was a person of, short built, and I think shorter than me, a bit shorter than me, just a bit shorter than me, and fair skinned. So good. I thought first it was looked like a Latino, but when he said Israeli, I understood it was a Jewish person. So he said it was for Israeli telecommunication company wanted to rent the property. So when I was opening door, he had a green box on his right hand, and he was slowly pulling it up towards his hip from from below his hip. He was holding it straight first, down below hip, with his straight hand, but then he's slowly pulling it up. I didn't think of anything at that time because servant. I guess the criminals had told the servant to keep an eye on me, who comes to meet me, talks to me about what, because they were always afraid of me. As I've talked about. So he instantly put the box down. I didn't think much of it. I had noticed it, but it was green box. Mean, I know now what it was. So we went upstairs. He started taking pictures of the room, and then the way he was taking it was very unusual. He was just holding phone with camera, just in a position that looked a bit different. As if he was scanning it. not really taking pictures, like, I mean, like a round motion like that. So, so I mean, but the servant girl was with me all the time. So I guess he couldn't quite suit me. He'd come to suit me. I mean, that was an Israeli man coming to suit me. So I went. He told me, "Let's go look around the property," and we went front of the property trees. He said the trees has to be cut, because we need a big equipment put in here. And while he was telling me, he had that green box aimed at me, and I looked at him. And just at that point, when he was briefing me about the trees have to be cut, and because we're having big equipment put all around this compound, I asked him. I mean, I just realized. I mean, this guy is telling me about equipment and bringing all that in, renting my property, but he's not even given his name to me, nor his card. I said, "Do you have card?" And I looked at him, and he was pointing the green box at me, my torso, just by my chest. And I literally looked at him and we were like close, this close. I like, and then he fled. He ran away. He he just rushed out of the compound, and I couldn't do anything because Devraj Dahal had confirmed, obviously already, it was the Royal Massacre, Nepal 2001, was international intel operation outsourced to Israeli Mossad. And when I said, well, when he had tried to reconfirm with me what I thought, I said, well, it's a possibility. And where he had given me that smile, sadist, sly smile. And then, and this guy telling himself, but I mean, what was striking was later on I thought, why would he tell those Israeli telecommunication company? I tried to make me, afraid because it's Israeli that I would be afraid. And I thought that was very amateurish. Amateurish. And then he fled like that. And I mean, obviously you can't do anything. And I can talk only now, and because I don't have anything to lose now.